Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Mullen, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Experts at Minnesota, Developing Collaborative Connections Among Faculty, Researchers, and Librarians, sponsored by Elsevier and featuring Kate McCready of the University of Minnesota Libraries and Cynthia Cleto of Elsevier Research Intelligence. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. We'll spend some time responding to your questions at the end of today's program, so feel free to submit your questions throughout. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Kate McCready recently transitioned into the co-lead for the library's Open Scholarship and Publishing Services unit within the university libraries. Kate is responsible for providing services and infrastructure that support the creation, production, and dissemination of UMN faculty and instructor-produced digital scholarship. Previously, she was the director of the Experts at Minnesota project. This website creates profiles for University of Minnesota faculty to allow for research networking and the discovery of the institution's expertise. Kate is a librarian with an MLIS from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. At the University of Minnesota, she has served at the reference desk, taught research methodology classes, led a variety of reference and information services, and coordinated several grant projects. Cynthia Cleto is the Systems Manager for North America within Elsevier's Research Intelligence Group. Cynthia facilitates adoption of current research information systems, CRIS, in order for institutions to gain insight into their research engine. Prior to Elsevier, Cynthia worked in project management, sales, and consulting in the STM and healthcare fields, predominantly for Elsevier, Springer, and Time Medical publishers. Before entering the STM field, Cynthia trained and worked as a graduate student and manager in genomics laboratories at McGill University. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Cynthia Cleto. Take it away, Cynthia.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. The librarian is facilitator of the institutional research enterprise. We will use a case study today of University of Minnesota, which implemented PURE. That's Elsevier's Research Information Management System. And this actually resulted in the increased visibility of the library to major stakeholder groups at the institution. And so today I will be speaking to you, as well as my colleague Kate McCready from the University of Minnesota. And just to let you know, I might say UMN instead of University of Minnesota, just to make it a little shorter sometimes. But to show you that we're real people, here we are. As you can see here, these job titles represent where we were when we started the project, not the titles we have now. So how long have we actually known each other, Kate?
Hi, Cynthia. Hi, everyone. I guess it's been a long time. It's been about 3 years, long enough for each of us to get assigned new responsibilities. We have a new project director, Jan Franzen, here at the University of Minnesota for Experts at Minnesota. And not only have things changed for us in the last year, there's a lot of new developments in PURE, right, over the last 3 years. And we'll touch on that toward the end of the talk, though, right?
Yeah. But to start with, let's talk about our project that we did together. So this is a story of a university in the Midwest, University of Minnesota. I was a consultant on the project from the Elsevier side, and I worked with Kate, who reported to the university librarian then. We carried out the implementation of the Pure Experts portal, and now UMN is in the process of migrating to the newest version that has more functionality. So the important thing about this story is how the library played a pivotal role in this initiative, and what did we really accomplish in the last 3 years. So first, the library was the project lead on Experts at Minnesota. It had the expertise in the areas relevant to the project. It brought together the VPs of research and other deans in the institution. And finally, it created a directory of Minnesota research assets and expertise. So why create an expertise portal? For the most part, that's about collaboration. So creating and stimulating collaboration within the institution, whether that's cross-disciplinary, international, corporate, because that actually increases impact of publications and increases citation rates. And so I did want to ask my first question to Kate. Did you guys actually have a targeted goal of collaboration?
Yes, we did. In fact, the primary driver for implementing the research networking system on our campus was to increase collaboration. We know from other research that we've done here that collaborative work is essential to scholarship. It's really expected, but there's often barriers of time and expense that make it really difficult. So we hoped that this tool would be, one piece to help faculty make connections on campus more easily to make their collaborative work more efficient.
Were there any other goals for the system?
Yes, we hoped to have greater exposure to our constituents, like the legislature and the state's residents. We are a land-grant university, so we want to make sure that they know what we're doing and that they're involved. And potential students, especially grad students, could learn more about us before they made the choice to come here. We wanted to make connections with media and industry as well. Right. And we hope to find additional relevant funding opportunities. We also hoped that once we had a really clean, author-disambiguated data set, that we could reuse it for research in other campus systems. So since we've been talking about it, let's take a look at it and see what it actually looks like. This is our site at experts.umn.edu. Cynthia, do you want to talk about the features and functionality of the site and tell everybody how it was built?
Sure. So what exactly is Pure Experts Portal? At UMN, it's known as Experts at Minnesota. So this is a collection of UMN expertise showcased to the globe. So all the faculty, schools, departments, expertise found in those groups are included in the portal. So UMN's portal is the biggest site that we have for an individual institution. I think, Kate, you guys have about 5,000 faculty now, right, within the site?
Yes, we do, at Research Associates. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's huge. That draws a lot of traffic. So let's look at how this system ensures that expertise is actually findable in an accurate manner. So let's go to the next slide. So we do that via the Fingerprint Engine. And how exactly does this work? The Fingerprint Engine mines all the faculty members' abstracts from Scopus. That's the first step. Then the second step, it applies natural language processing techniques to lift the control terms off of the abstracts. And the control terms or concepts are identified in thesauri spanning all the major disciplines. So that could be arts and humanities, meshed thesauri, compendex, geometry. You see some examples there. So the result is the third step, which is the fingerprint, which is a collection of weighted control terms that more accurately defines the faculty member's body of work. Then what we do after that is we aggregate the fingerprints of the publication abstracts that are associated with the researcher to generate the fingerprint representing the author's career-long expertise. We do this for all the researchers profiled in the application, and that becomes the live site. So let's pause for a second here, because Kate and I are curious about where you are in developing RNS at your campus. So we want to poll you to learn more about how this is playing out on your campus. So hopefully you all see an interactive poll. The first question is, do you have a research networking system on campus? Please answer yes or no. And if your answer is yes, please choose from the following. If yes, is your library involved in implementing your RNS? So let's just give it a few more seconds. Please go ahead and answer the polls, and let's wait a little bit until it stabilizes. Is that everybody? It looks like it.
Yep, there's a couple more clicks, but
yeah. We can wait just a few more seconds. I was going to say minutes, but can't do that.
Yeah, that looks good. It might change a little.
Yeah, yeah, that does look good. So it looks like maybe more people answered no to having a research networking system on campus. That's interesting.
Yeah, more than 2/3 of you don't. So you probably want to hear a lot about how we did it.
Yeah. And for the ones that answered yes, the largest faction is we are partners in the implementation operations. And that doesn't come as a surprise to us, right, Kate? I mean, right. I think the library is pretty central to this kind of conversation.
Yeah, we definitely have expertise that is relevant.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Thank you for everybody for clicking in. At Minnesota, probably about at least 10 years ago, we decided to consider our role in supporting research activities very broadly. We want to support the entire life cycle of research activities. So, the thinking about it and creating a system to stimulate collaboration is not how collaboration was done traditionally, and libraries really weren't involved in that process before. So it's somewhat the road less traveled that we headed on, but we really hope that it's going to make finding those connections more efficient and effective. And in the past, faculty would meet each other ad hoc at conferences, for example, and create relationships there. But in a directory of research access expertise, you can proactively find relevant potential collaborators and catalyze those relationships. And that's what we really hope for here.
So how did UMN decide to invest in PureK?
Well, the potential of the system was first identified by a handful of our collegiate deans and associate research deans. They initiated the conversation on campus. And after leadership, which included the University Libraries leadership, held a campus-wide discussion, all of the schools and colleges, as well as the Office of the Vice President for Research, decided to financially support the project. They wanted to see increased collaboration, they wanted to showcase the excellent work being done at the university, and they wanted to work to identify new funding sources. So then the libraries did the work to implement it. Is that what you've seen at other institutions?
Yeah, I definitely see that at other institutions, not just in the U.S., but overseas as well. But it actually, at UMN, took the library to really head the project, though. So why do you think that is, Kate?
Well, I should say the Vice President for Research is another common good service provider on campus, and they are our co-sponsor, but we really took the lead on the implementation side of it. Because they, along with the deans, came to the library to implement the system for a couple key reasons. One is that the libraries serve all the colleges and professional schools on campus, and we already have an embedded network of liaison librarians within every department on campus. So it helps with communication and support to have that network. And it made sense to have an enterprise-wide application be run out of and supported by the library's network of staff. The Vice President for Research's office was very involved, but they didn't have some of the knowledge and experience that the libraries had, including our longstanding relationship with Elsevier, experience with contracts and with data and information resource purchases. We also had a very unique understanding of the Scopus literature database and how well-structured, clean data could be leveraged for other uses. Both the technical aspects and the communication with stakeholders that's necessary when you're starting up a new system.
So the library did quite a bit of work to get the initiative started, but what were the specific roles that the library played?
Well, we began with taking the lead on the contract negotiations since we had that in place, and especially on the topic of data reuse and analysis, and that went really well. And then we next stepped into the data acquisition. So in order to set up Pure, you need to identify who's going to be profiled. And on a campus as big as ours, that takes a little bit of work to identify who you're going to pull information on from your HR system. So the Office of the Vice President for Research helped us make those connections with our internal data providers, things like the HR system, grant award data, patent data, and we figured out how we could pull the data and how often we could update it in the system. Then we also handled the data management. So once you have received those data files from the internal providers, you have to do some cleanup work, which the libraries are really good at doing with large data sets. And we had to do things like transform abbreviated college and department names into real language. We also had to apply some manual filters to the data. We're pulling things by job code, and we wanted to include directors of research centers, but not directors of finance offices or human resources. We really wanted to get those doing research. And then we handled the communication with the stakeholders, both rolling out a communications plan that I'll talk about later, and then we also handled answering questions, which obviously libraries are completely familiar with. And in the first 2 years of the project, we assisted over 700 faculty and researchers with their questions and their requests to facilitate their profile being created.
And what was probably the most common question that you got?
I think it was a pretty simple one, just to add a missing citation. They were pretty straightforward to respond to. We had a response time of within 24 hours. We wanted to get back to the patron, and we worked with the Elsevier's product development team each time to see if the citation could be automatically added, if the citation was in Scopus, or if the publication was selectively indexed in Scopus, then Elsevier would take the lead and typically got the citation added very quickly, and the response was always timely. And if that couldn't be done, then we would work with the patron to manually add the item.
Right.
So once we had the data, and Elsevier did the work that Cynthia talked about of creating the fingerprint and creating the profiles in the live site, we had a very powerful data set. And our informatics staff member, Stephen Braun, began to explore what we could learn from the data. And he created visualizations, such as this one pictured, that shows the author relationships between two of our colleges. So CBS, that you can see there, is the College of Biological Sciences, and CFANS is the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Sciences. And this shows who has the most collaborations with faculty in the other college. These are individual author circles. And the bigger both in CBS and CFANS, and you see that they have rather large circles. They're doing a lot of collaborative work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we did work like that, and then we also did some other metrics that I'll mention later with the data. And I wanted to give a sense of kind of where this work led. This diagram has been used on campus recently, and it shows the full picture of our research information management systems that have been implemented on campus. The gray areas are those where the libraries has had a lead role. We've done work in licensing databases, storing our affiliates' creations, author disambiguation, data analysis, sharing data, evaluating systems, and through the implementation of Pure and the subsequent data analysis and sharing that we've done, the libraries have been immersed in the world of research information management systems on campus. And now we're routinely included in all the conversations on that topic and about data analysis and campus metrics.
That's really great that you've gained that kind of visibility on campus. So it sounds like the primary stakeholder that you had was also your co-sponsor, which was the VP of Research, yes?
Yep.
And was it his office's aim to increase collaboration for all the reasons we had previously discussed?
Yes, they are co-sponsor, and I would say they're a primary stakeholder. They definitely wanted to see increased collaboration, and so did the secondary stakeholders, the collegiate deans and the associate deans of research. They wanted to increase collaboration on campus as well as identify new funding sources for their researchers. Yeah. And they also wanted to know about their department's impact and reach. So, for example, the Dean of Medicine has been really interested in the impact of each department in his college. And so the libraries have done some analytical work based on this clean data source and produced results for them. The other secondary stakeholders I should mention are our outreach offices on campus, such as the communications offices and the technology commercialization office. They're routinely asked for our faculty's expertise by corporate entities, and they might have a pharmaceutical company, for example, who's asking if we have anybody who's working in Ebola, and we would definitely want to collaborate with them. So that's been a helpful tool for those folks. And then with our, of course, we're also accountable to all the individual profile holders and want to meet their needs. They wanted to see increased collaboration as well, but first and foremost for them is if they're being portrayed accurately in a way that makes sense to them. For many of them, this is their primary online presence. And so they wanted to find collaborators that are relevant to their work who are kind of outside of their primary field. They told us over and over that they already know who is working alongside them in their field, but it's when you stretch outside of that. So for example, an English professor said to me that she wanted to find a faculty member from medicine to sit on one of her advisees' dissertation committees. So she went to Experts at Minnesota and typed in a controlled term, for example, like vaccine, and then found a listing of experts who have that weighty term in their fingerprint that she could kind of start making contacts with and sending her advisee to those folks.
Great. So thanks for sharing those needs that the system met. Now that you've brought all these folks together through their needs, was there anything else you needed to do to make sure the project was a success?
Well, we definitely had to spread the word and had to launch a pretty extensive communications plan. But we're used to doing that with major system upgrades for the catalog or things like that. So we leveraged that communications expertise to let the whole campus know that Experts in Minnesota existed. So we held focus groups primarily for the arts and humanities to find out their specific needs. We knew that while there are arts and humanities journals in Scopus, the arts and humanities scholars either publish in books or they do exhibits and performances that wouldn't necessarily be captured. Though I do hear that Elsevier is planning to add about 75,000 books by the end of this year.
Yeah. Right.
So, and then we created some talking point documents for the deans, the associate deans, the provost's office, the president's office, and the liaison librarians, the ones who would be receiving questions about the project. We made sure that they had a clear understanding of it. We gave presentations to kind of the major bodies on campus, the Council of Research Associate Deans, the Senate Research Committee, the Senate Library Committee, the AHC Deans Council. We also sent out messages to the campus community through a variety of mechanisms and specifically targeted the communications offices, the IT directors, and the grant coordinators. so that the grant coordinators could be aware of the funding opportunity information. And then we sent quarterly messages to every individual profile holder with direct links to their profiles. And this is where the majority of our questions came from and a lot of engagement. And then we set up and scheduled trainings for librarians and profile holders and created an FAQ out of the most commonly asked questions that we received.
Yeah, wow. That's already a lot of work. So did the library's work finally end there? Not yet, or almost?
Not quite yet. Like I mentioned, with the arts and humanities faculty, we had to do some other enhancements to make the tool stick, to make it work for them. We did a data entry project that we collected the CVs of all of the faculty in the College of Liberal Arts and the College of Design, and we had students do data entry on performances and exhibits and books and book chapters into the database. Since those weren't automatically being captured anywhere, we wanted to make sure that their profiles looked as robust as somebody from the medical sciences. And because we wanted faculty members to really have a place where they could showcase their work. And we found that they were open to reviewing their profiles. The emails that we sent out were routinely opened, but their time is limited, so we did try and offer as much assistance and guidance as possible to make sure that we weren't burdening them with yet an additional task. But now it's been nearly 3 years since we launched, and I would say it's been a successful project.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks, Kate. I think the libraries were definitely pivotal to this implementation. It brought stakeholders together. So I think in our next slide we'll see just a summary of those points. It used its expertise to coordinate the implementation. And finally, the library made the concept stick. So exactly. But now, maybe we can have another pause, and we'd like to hear more specifically from the audience again. So on your campus partnerships, I guess, because Kate has created all these campus partnerships through the project. So we're curious about you. How are you involved? So this is another poll that we have. How are you involved with others on campus in working on and thinking about the topics of research networking systems? So which of these groups have you worked with closely? Provost's office, research, deans, CTO, CIOs, sponsored programs, president's office, medical schools. A lot of these guys have RNS systems because a lot of them have CTSAs, clinical translational award grants, and then maybe even human resources. So let's take a few seconds again and see what we get.
I'm curious about the other category. If anybody's marking the other category, it might be nice to put in the Q&A what you're, who you're working with.
Exactly.
Not surprisingly, there's a lot of research offices, deans of the various colleges. Yeah, those were the drivers here. We did not work a lot with the Office of Information Technology as far as implementing, though they were our major data provider. So they worked with us to pull HR data, to pull grant award data. They were very, very helpful there.
The least with the president's office, it seems like. Oh, and someone just recanted. Sorry, I put that out there. Okay.
Great.
So most of it is deans, CIO, CTO, VPR, it seems like. And the others, if you could maybe put a little note as to what those others are, that would be really interesting to see.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And so, we're using Pure right now mainly as a collaborative tool,
Yeah.
and as well as to find funding opportunities. But we've also used the data ourselves to do some interesting visualizations and analysis work outside of Experts at Minnesota. But I know that Pure has developed other functionality now, and I wondered if you could tell us about that, Cynthia.
Sure. Sounds good. So at UMN, Experts at Minnesota is really more of a collaborative tool, that's right. But I think you guys will actually also be adding some other modules, right?
Yeah, we're investigating use of the reporting module, and we are definitely planning to add the import module as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that module, at least the import module, allows UMN to import from other publication sources like Web of Science, PubMed, WorldCat. So one thing that Pure is that it's source agnostic. That's one of the ways it's holistic. So what else can Pure do? What you but from other online sources, as well as institutional data like proposals and awarded grants. And once the data is in Pure, you can do reporting on it. So the bubble at around 2 or 2:30, reporting for stakeholders, funders, even administration. And I'm sure most institutions here would have a strategic plan. So Pure would be great at tracking progress against a strategic plan using the metrics that it has. So long as the data exists in a structured database, we can try to pull it in. But this is a limit. So of course, if it doesn't exist anywhere that it can be automatically ingested, then we can't pull it in. So for things like conference attendance or performances, these might have to be manually entered. So it does reduce the burden on faculty because its main goal is to automate data ingest. So that's another portion of the research challenge, reducing faculty workload. It also has push-button CVs. The expertise use case in the bubble on between 7 and 8 is what UMN has. So you can stimulate collaboration across departments, institutions, sectors, as well as national boundaries. And then finally, the last research challenge is if Pure contains the intelligence on your faculty's expertise, we can also target relevant grant opportunities directly to somebody's profile in Pure.
And we do have that implemented here at Minnesota, the funding opportunities.
Right. That's right.
So, Cynthia, when you're talking about Pure giving a holistic view of the institution, what are you referring to specifically?
So I'm referring to the way that Pure ingests data and what it ingests. So it does the holistic view by bringing in data from systems that are external to the institution, like Web of Science, Scopus, et cetera, WorldCat that has books metadata as well as internal to the institution. So you see here on the left-hand side, these are other systems, client data that we can ingest, like legacy data, finance, awarded grants, HR, and even document repositories, so your institutional repository. So there are two parts to Pure. The front-end view that you see on the right-hand side, and then the back-end view that you see on the left-hand side. So in the first view on the front end, faculty can log in, so that's the first screenshot here on the right-hand side. Faculty can log in and see what's captured for them and do some editing if they want. The second view is admins logging in to do reporting on the data or maybe system configuration. And then the third view is the public-facing view of Pure, like Experts at Minnesota. So the back end, on the other hand, on the left-hand side, can integrate Scopus data and other online sources. So you see profile refinement services, and then the other online sources. So Kate, when you start getting the import module, you'll be able to import from Web of Science, PubMed, Mendeley, ArcSci, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then, finally, the most important piece for the library, most likely, is the fact that we can do integration with the institutional repository. So Pure can help populate the IR.
And that is an area of interest for us now that we have an open access policy in effect here at Minnesota. Can you show us, though, how Peer addresses some of the other challenges you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, sure. I think we can go to the next slide for that. So here is a way where reporting provides intelligence on the institution. So this is an example of a dashboard where Peer is pulling together all the data it's captured to present a particular story to the viewer. So it provides the stakeholders with intelligence on the institution, things like who are your most collaborative faculty, how much peer-reviewed literature do you have per year, or maybe even tracking performance indicators like how many proposals or awarded grants did you get per year. You can create dashboards for any stakeholder at any level of the hierarchy. So from faculty to schools, departments, institutes, working groups, and then people. Other things that it can do on the next slide. This is an example of how a profile in Peer can auto-populate a public CV, which decreases the burden on your faculty once again. So we also have CV templates for what faculty usually submit with a grant proposal, things like the NIH form, SF biosketches.
And that's great. I know there's definitely a need to make that automated and much more easily created, but obviously a CV will only be as robust as the data stored in the system. And since we're not storing everything in Peer currently, I'm wondering, is it possible to produce a CV that can be edited to include other information that's not stored in Peer?
Yeah, definitely. So you can save that document that you see in front of you as Word or PDF. Peer does allow you to store fields like education, awards, honors, and other elements like that. So you can add that to the document later on.
Oh, that's great.
And then one more strategic area that I think is important for libraries that Peer addresses is something that many campuses are working on currently. Kate, is UMN implementing ORCID?
We are just in the early phases of launching our plan.
That. So Elsevier is a member of ORCID and actively supports ORCID and Peer. So you can see that in this way, again, we can reduce the burden on faculty and librarians. So if you link your ORCID license to Peer, Peer can actually automatically create and verify ORCIDs within the system. So those are some of the specific ways, really quickly, that we can address the research challenges at UMN and other institutions as well.
So with that, and looking at all those different challenges and how you're meeting them, we wanted to hear from you all out there. We have another poll, and we wanted to hear which of the following activities are your libraries involved in. Are you working on populating your institutional repository? Are you creating reports? Are you generating biosketches or CVs? Are you working on implementing ORCID IDs on your campus? And it looks like the last poll, unfortunately, it looks like we're only allowed to select one. So maybe select the one you're working hardest on.
Okay. Yeah. IR looks like it's winning.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a lot of people are involved in that.
Yeah.
All right. So,
interesting.
You know, I shared how Minnesota was using experts at Minnesota's data to do some visualizations on the most active researchers in those two departments, or two colleges rather. Can you, Cynthia, can you share some other use cases, innovative projects out there, innovative uses of the portal or the data that you know about?
Yeah, of course. I think we have a few slides on that. So one of the use cases we have is that of corporate academic collaboration. So this is an example here showing how several different universities in Michigan, so that's University of Michigan, Michigan State, Western Michigan, Dearborn, and Wayne State have come together. So what we did was we created an overarching search interface that focuses on expertise finding, but for corporate entities. So this kind of brings back your example, Kate, of that Ebola. You know, if a pharmaceutical entity was interested in collaborating with UMN expertise in drug discovery, perhaps. So what happens there is once an expert is found based on the concept search or control terms, then the link for the faculty member's profile on their institution's Peer Experts portal will be displayed. So if this exercise is done well, it could result in economic development and also influx of funding from companies into the state for things like maybe spin-off companies or incubators that they'd like to create within the state because of this academic corporate collaboration.
So it would be possible to have a Minnesota statewide peer expert site.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you know, Mayo Clinic and UMN were interested in creating sort of a search interface that encompasses those two portals, then our group could build that interface for both the portals, and that would be an example of Peer Experts for the state of Minnesota. Yep.
So there are lots of possibilities.
Yep, lots of possibilities. Mm. And also speaking of statewide portals, this portal is another example of statewide. This is Reach NC, and it's statewide for North Carolina. So there are 17 institutions within Reach NC. This includes UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, NC State, and then several others that are more liberal arts colleges. But this visualization takes the data out of their Peer Experts portal. These are smaller cluster areas in water research. Maybe it's in groundwater pollution, things like that. So these folks may be very useful as leads for large grant applications in water research since they are catalysts for collaboration. So we're entering the science of team science here when we start talking about assembling teams like this. So there are, in summary, a lot of institutional needs that Peer can help meet. By creating a holistic data source, Peer can display expertise profiles for faculty, facilitate collaboration, help researchers find funding sources, create reports and analyze data, and also reduce faculty workload.
I would say, you know, we definitely met some of those, Peer met some of those needs for us here at the University of Minnesota. And since we're on the topic of that, we have one more poll, and thinking about your needs on your campuses, these are some research challenges, and we're curious to see how many of you have encountered these at your institutions. Again, we had hoped it was a check all that apply, but it doesn't seem to be working that way. So maybe check the one that's most important to you, a public display of expertise, a holistic, curated source of publication, institutional data, and your scholars pulled together. Being able to gain institutional insight via reporting and visualizations on the data that you stored. Decreasing faculty workload. I know we hear about that a lot here at Minnesota. And then also finding targeted, relevant grant opportunities. That was definitely a driver for us in implementing the system. What are we seeing? Looks like a lot of people want that holistic, curated source of publications, institutional data, and merged with their scholars.
Yeah. Followed by collaboration, yeah. And then the third is targeting relevant grant opportunities to faculty. So that probably involves work with a sponsored programs department as well.
And for us, the Sponsored Programs Office is a part of the research office.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I definitely, what's interesting is, as I heard kind of from on our campus, I heard a lot about the public display of expertise and the reporting or visualizations on the data, and decreasing faculty workload and the relevant grant opportunities. But it was really the libraries that has been the voice at the table that talks about the curated data and making sure that the author disambiguation has worked properly and that we have a clean, comprehensive, as much as possible, and keep making it more comprehensive data source.
Right. But also I think as more and more libraries get involved with these kinds of systems, even the ones that are about gaining institutional insight by reporting and decreasing faculty workload, those aren't so robust right now in this poll, but that probably will increase once institutions and libraries get more involved with these kinds of systems, I would say. That would be my guess.
Makes sense.
Because you'll be supporting the VPR quite strongly.
Yeah. Okay. So that concludes what we were going to present to you, but we would be happy to take your questions. We want to thank you so much for attending and participating. And we're going to start working on the questions that came in. I think the first one was assigned to you, Cynthia, hoping to hear the distinction between RMS and institutional repositories. I don't know if that covered enough, but if you want to address that.
Yeah. So a mesh of data. So publication scholarly works, but also institutional leadership would be looking at proposals and awards, because one of the things they want to see is how productive are people, not just in creating publications, which is almost downstream, but also are they bringing in dollars into the institution? Are they applying for grants to get these dollars in? How effective are they in translating applications or proposals to awarded grants? So those are the different things I think that leadership is looking at, and a research information management system can capture all that and bring disparate systems at the institution together. Institutional repositories might maybe capture more of the scholarly works portion. I'm not sure how much it's really brought in about other institutional data at this point in time. I hope that addresses the question.
Yeah, at least for me it did. I know here at Minnesota, our institutional repository, the Digital Conservancy, is the primary function of it is archival and preservation of our scholars' works, not necessarily trying to have that full picture of everything that they did throughout their career. Doesn't capture all those media appearances or performances, whereas a research information management system wanting to make sure it's got full information about not only their publications, but their grants and the impact of their grants, so on.
Yeah, and also it can also capture and hold manuscripts. So the integration with the IR is really important here, because if people are submitting manuscripts into Peer as well, and they can also upload data sets, for example, then maybe that is something that should be ported into the IR as well. So we have integrations with the IR to help populate that with scholarly works and data objects.
All right, I'm going to move to the next question. Consequential impact on those author metrics in those fields. So we did that data entry project, like I said, for everyone in the College of Liberal Arts and the College of Design in order to make sure that their profiles were robust. But not not all of the data that since we were adding data from CVs and we were doing it primarily for display purposes, we didn't have all the data linked, and so putting metrics on that data wasn't going to work tremendously well. We knew about the development of things like the import module that were happening in the field of research information management, so we decided to do a lightweight data entry work. So we made sure that the profiles were robust enough for them to feel comfortable being part of the system. We also allowed any scholar to opt out if they wanted to. We have a very low opt-out rate. So of our 5,400 profiles, we've had 70 opt-outs, and I would say probably 15 of those are no longer at the university. They were close to retiring, and they thought, I don't need to make collaborations or connections anymore. So we definitely were working for the public display, and what we decided also on the public display is not to put impact measures on that display. We could have put H-indexes and had that display on their profiles, and we chose not to, and just to look at that data internally. Hope that answers the question. All right, so next one that I see is for you, Cynthia. It's how does the import module work? Is it a batch import, or does each individual faculty member have to import their works?
The import module is basically allowing to pull from the API of the various online sources that I mentioned earlier. So let's say, for Kate, you guys are using the profile refinement service already that has Scopus data. That's a huge overlap between Scopus and Web of Science, right? But there could be some journals that are in Web of Science that aren't in Scopus. And so the faculty member, when they log in, should be able to scan what the system has picked up from Web of Science belonging to them, and then they validate that. And then they say, yes, this is me, that's right, that looks right. And then they get a validator, which is typically at the library, to validate that. And so that's how it's brought in. But what we do for automated data ingest of publications is really through Scopus, because obviously we own that database, so we can do things to the data like fingerprinting and things like that. I hope that answers the question too.
I think so. And there's a follow-up question from Rebecca Bryant, who posed that one. She said, we have a pilot version of Pure, and it appears that the user must type in their 16-digit ORCID ID rather than link. Can you clarify? Specifically, do you use the API?
Okay. Maybe we should take that offline. And Rebecca, you have my contact information there, actually, and let's look at that specific example from you guys, if that's okay.
Shared equipment, et cetera. So at Minnesota, we are not currently tracking or cataloging those resources. I don't know if you want to comment on the functionality of the system, Cynthia?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that is now possible with Pure is capturing facilities data and equipment data. So this is actually a content type that you can activate, Kate, on the back end. So if other folks are interested in this, we know that some of our institutions already have facilities data on their public site. So an example of that would be Northwestern. Experts at Northwestern, they have facilities data specifically to create collaborations around equipment. So if somebody has an MRI machine that's not being utilized, of course, you'd want to make that publicly available that you have that kind of facility. So that can now be captured and reported on in Pure.
Thanks. And then there is a question from Scott Dennis, who's my old colleague. Hi, Scott. He said, Kate, has UMN yet migrated to the new Pure software, or are you still using the original Cybele Expert software? Can you comment on the migration? We are still on the Cybele Expert software, and we have a Pure demo instance that has most of our data converted and live. When we first launched Experts at Minnesota, I was the one-woman show. I did the data management and the answering questions and the communication planning. But now we have a team of people that are working on Experts at Minnesota. As I mentioned, Jan Franzen is the project director here, and Connie Hendrick does the data, and then we have a team of some research services librarians doing the questions, and they are working on the migration. And we're hoping that it's going to happen within the next month or two. We've been making some project progress and doing some testing and looking at making sure that the timing works well for our campus and that the software is really ready to go. But Scott, feel free to give me a jingle if you want more information about our processes. And then I think there's one more question from Rebecca Gansel. Hi, Rebecca. And it's for Cynthia. It says, can you give us a rough estimate of the cost of Pure?
Perhaps we can also take that offline, but I can give folks here sort of a basis for how we price. So part of that is really about how many faculty members you would like us to capture data for. So that's one variable to pricing. Another variable is, do you want to just integrate online sources that are out there? So Scopus, Web of Science, so that's the import module. Or would you also like us to pull from your own institutional data? So that's an additional variable as well. So there's quite a few that we'll look at. There's maybe like 2 or 3. Also, if it's locally hosted or, you know, basically cloud hosted. Most of the time, people really want cloud hosted. So Kate's implementation is really hosted by us. Yeah, so there's quite a few things, but we can go through that. So Rebecca, please take down my information and contact me, and we can have a chat. Okay?
And we just have a couple minutes left, and there's one more question that's been assigned to Cynthia. It says, can you talk more about the type of repository integration supported by Pure? I see that Fedora, among others, is listed online.
Yeah, DSpace, Fedora, ePrints, Equella are the ones that are supported right now. If you have something else, let me know. Again, contact me, and we'll see what we can do. But for now, that's the most common we see in our institutions.
Another question came in, Cynthia. Is Pure implementation possible at institutions?
Then we'd have to get it from a legacy system that you have of publications. So it's source agnostic, but again, you know, if you choose to not have Scopus, then we can't do the fingerprinting either, because that's done on Scopus data because we own that content or that database. I hope that answers the question. I know there's going to be a lot. Most likely I see some other ones here that we haven't answered, so please do contact us. Our contact information is right on the slide there, and we'd be happy to speak with you. And we only have really a few minutes, so I think I'd like to perhaps call on Laura again to just kind of close the session. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today with our 1-hour session with me and Kate. This definitely has been great to present what we've been doing for the last 3 years, basically.
Yeah, kind of shows our history together.
Yeah, exactly.
Laura,
Okay.
are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank
Okay.
you. I'd like to give our presenters a virtual round of applause for spending time with us today and sharing some really great info. We do appreciate your insights. As a reminder, we have recorded today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from ACRL and Choice that will include instructions on